You are listening to The Hero's Journey. I'm Jeff Garvin.
And I'm Dan Zarzana.
Let the journey begin.
Here at The Hero's Journey, we discuss the story in its entirety, so this is your spoiler alert. If you have not watched Extraction and do not want the story spoiled for you, do not listen to this episode yet. Extract yourself now and check out one of our other episodes.
You can help us celebrate the 30th anniversary of Total Recall by listening to our March 2020 episode. Last month, we honored the 40th anniversary of The Shining, which might be... I think that's my favorite episode since Braveheart. Might even be tied.
We've done historical dramas, comedies, westerns, sci-fi, romance, western sci-fi romance. We try to hit all genres, but if you think that we are neglecting something, please leave a comment on this episode's page at heroesjourneypodcast.com and let us know what we're missing.
Before we talk about Extraction, Dan and I wanted to take a moment to thank all of our new patrons: Michelle Calderon, Susan Weiner, Chad Pauly, and David Kalikis. Thank you so much for becoming part of the Hero's Journey family.
If you are interested in supporting the Hero's Journey, Netscape navigate your way to patreon.com/heroesjourney. Okay, Jeff, let's discuss Extraction.
Starring Chris Hemsworth, probably one of the prettiest men to grace the screen since Brad Pitt, Extraction is the directorial debut of stuntman Sam Hargrave.
Netflix released Extraction exclusively on their streaming platform on April 24, 2020, making it the newest project we've ever covered. We've never really had the opportunity to cover a brand new film because usually we want to have the audio available, and we want to be able to watch the film multiple times. And so we generally go for something that is streaming so that we can capture the audio without having to do the illegal cell phone recording thing that...
I think also for me, it's much harder to get into a movie theater these days. I mean, even pre-coronavirus. And also, we like to watch the film multiple times and stop and slow to analyze. So it'd be more difficult to do something that was just in the theater.
Right.
Netflix is notoriously stingy about providing viewer data, but shortly after the film's release, Extraction was on pace to hit 90 million viewers in its first 4 weeks, which would make it the most viewed Netflix original in the studio's history.
Extraction is based on the graphic novel Ciudad, written by Andy Parks, illustrated by Fernando Leon Gonzalez, based on a story by Andy Parks, Anthony Russo, and Joe Russo, who also wrote the screenplay.
If those last two names sound familiar, it's because the brothers Russo are heavily involved in the wildly successful Marvel Cinematic Universe, directing Captain America Civil War, Avengers Infinity War, and the highest-grossing motion picture of all time, Avengers Endgame.
There's quite a few Marvel alums on Extraction. Hemsworth stars as Thor in the Marvel series. Casting director Sarah Halley Finn has cast several of the Marvel movies and the television shows. Extraction's director, Sam Hargrave, was the stunt coordinator on several of the Marvel films. So I think we should refer to him as Stuntman Sam for the duration of the episode.
Ooh, I'm in. Joining Hemsworth in this international cast are Rudgrash Jaiswal as Ovi Jr., Randeep Hooda as Seju, Golshifte Farhani as Nick, Priyanshu Panyuli as Amir Asif, David Harbour as Gaspar, and Suraj Rakame as Farad in this film debut. And I'd like to punish Dan heavily for making me say each and every one of all the Indian actors in this movie. My apologies if I mispronounce them. I spent a lot of time looking up how to pronounce them, and I found very little clue, so I did my best.
I think you did really, really well. Golshifte Farhani is Iranian, though. She's not
Oh, that's
Indian.
right. She's Iranian. That's right.
And David Harbour is American.
I didn't say they were all Indian. I said the Indian ones are the ones you make me say.
Hey, fun fact. Maybe it's just fun for me, but Randeep Hooda and I share a birthday. Date and year.
Wow.
We are exactly the same age, but I am less than 1% as badass as he is.
Dan, no matter how badass you think you are, there is always a badass who's bigger than you.
Words of wisdom, Jeffrey. Words of wisdom. All right, we're on the clock and the timer is ticking. Payment is wired to your offshore account. The target is acquired. We're dropping into Extraction. Act 1 begins with the world of common day. This is where we see the hero in their status quo, normal life. Before we begin, there's a prologue, sort of, a flash forward.
Yeah.
To the end of the film at the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Do you feel that was necessary?
I do not.
After watching the film, I thought we could have just lost that prologue entirely and just started the film with Ovi Jr. being kidnapped. And that would have been a sufficient beginning to the film. I don't understand why that prologue was there, except if it was possibly to alert the viewer that, yes, you've got this mercenary guy, but who is struggling with the loss of somebody, obviously, based on his little fuzzy vision.
I think it was a different reason. And I think if it had been released in the theater, we wouldn't have needed that prologue. But it's so easy to turn off a Netflix film and switch to something else that I think they felt pressure to have Chris Hemsworth on the screen almost immediately to signal to people that he was a big part of the movie. I think if you'd had no Hemsworth for 5 or 10 minutes, people might have clicked away. I think that was their fear.
Okay, so the world of common day, a feud rages between crime lord Amir Asif of Dhaka, Bangladesh, and Ovi Mahajan of India. These are two, as they are described, the biggest drug lords in their regions.
Right.
And the latest offense, as Ovi Mahajan is serving a prison sentence, Amir Asif kidnaps Ovi Mahajan Jr.
Right.
Mahajan then orders his lieutenant, Saju, to rescue his son. And this scene I saw a little bit of, especially now that I've seen the whole film. Mm-hmm. There is a hero journey for Saju.
Absolutely.
And you get his call to adventure.
तो ढाका जाएगा
क्या करना है
उसको वापस लाना है
उसके लिए पूरी फौज लगेगी यूवी
तो मैं चुप कर इंतजाम फौज की.
There's a refusal of the call where Saju says you'd need an army to go to Dhaka and rescue Ovi Jr. And Ovi Sr. says, then hire an army.
Yeah.
And then threatens his own family and says, if you want your son to see his next birthday, you go get my son.
Right.
While Saju is the rival of Tyler, he's got his own journey here.
Totally agree.
Saju then sets up who Tyler is when he's speaking to his wife in the kitchen. Mm-hmm. And he says,
एक आदमी है जो ये सब काम करता है लेकिन उसकी कीमत तो महाजन की औकात से भी बाहर है पर मेरे पास एक आइडिया है मुश्किल है पर
there's a man I know who does this kind of work, but he's more expensive than Ovi can afford, but there's a way I can play this.
Yeah.
Then we cut to Australia, where Tyler Rake is backpacking with a couple of friends or something. They're relaxing atop a 30-meter cliff, and Tyler literally says, hold my beer.
Oh, my beer, would you?
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah.
I said hold it, don't drink.
Yeah, gotcha.
And then steps off this 30-meter cliff into the lake below.
Yes.
Right.
He sits at the bottom of the lake, and as the camera pushes in on him, he looks like he's holding back tears, or he may actually be crying underwater. Something is ripping him up inside.
Yeah.
That he's sitting at the bottom of a lake crying, and then you see that little fuzzy image of a memory or something of somebody. All you see are feet and legs at this point. So Tyler has lost somebody, and he's struggling with it, and that's Tyler's world of common day.
I would add two things. One, that the story begins with a baptism for Tyler, and it's a beautiful symmetry with the end of the film. And then the other thing is I really forgot you left out that he's a chicken farmer. And he loves chickens, except that they poop over everything. And I think that's a deep symbol. I had written Tyler Rake is an Australian chicken farmer. That leads us to call to adventure. Our hero is presented with a challenge which renders him unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. Nick is Tyler's agent/ops manager, his handler, and she approaches him with a mercenary job.
We landed a whale.
Oh, yeah?
Extraction. Indian kid. Drug lord's son. Rival gangsters holding this kid in Dhaka.
That's a pretty clear call to adventure.
Yeah.
And as you had said, Seju has his own call to adventure in that scene with Ovi Sr., where he says, "Get back, my son."
Right. The next segment of the hero's journey is refusal of the call. Confronted with fear of the unknown, the hero refuses the call, or sometimes this energy is expressed from outside forces other than the hero.
Yeah.
For Tyler, when he's speaking with Nick in his little chicken shack home somewhere in the Australian outback, when Nick says that the job is in Dhaka, Tyler says, "Call Gaspar. He lives in Dhaka." That's not much of a refusal of the call, but it is a very brief moment where Tyler is offering to push the job elsewhere.
Yeah.
Nick, though, says Gaspar's out of the game. Nick then witnesses Tyler take some OxyContin pills, washing it down with whiskey, and says, "This was a mistake."
Right.
This is Nick now rescinding the call to adventure.
Yes.
And Tyler reminds Nick there's nobody else who's going to commit to this job because it's a bad one.
Yeah.
And in this scene, you can tell, based on the way Tyler and Nick treat each other, that I think there was a romantic relationship there at one point. And it is now over. There's some tenderness from Nick to Tyler when he comes in. He's got a cut on his head or something. He's like trying to apply first aid to himself. And she comes over, stands very close to him, and starts cleaning his forehead. And when she approaches him and stands very close to him and says,
You're hoping if you spin the chamber enough times, you're gonna catch a bullet.
Tyler has a death wish, and he doesn't disagree with her when she says this.
Yeah.
There's an interesting moment as Nick is leaving. Tyler says, "What's his name?" And the answer from Nick is Ovi Mahajan Jr. But the question could very well have been, "What's the name of your new partner?"
Interesting.
That was the answer I expected when Tyler said, "What's his name?" Because this entire scene, I'm seeing this tension between two people who there were just clues there that they had a relationship and it was now over.
I didn't pick up on that, but in retrospect, I can see that. I think the performances in this film by the actress who plays Nick and by Chris Hemsworth really elevate this film above a typical action film.
It could have been a Steven Seagal movie.
Yeah, they exactly. They both put so much heart into this film, and they make the relationships tangible on screen, where some of it's not in the script, it's in the performance, and I really enjoyed that aspect. It pulled me in more than a typical action movie usually does.
Yeah, I feel the same.
That takes us to Meeting with the Mentor, where the hero receives counsel on how to operate in the special world. Here we have the classic action movie mentor moment as Tyler's team lays out the details of his extraction mission.
This is our extract. Ovi Mahajan, 14 years old. His father, Ovi Mahajan Sr., is in jail. So his people employed us to get the boy back. And they refused to negotiate.
What about our opposition?
Amir Asif, Dhaka's very own Pablo Escobar.
Biggest drug lord in India versus biggest drug lord in Bangladesh.
A lot of bad blood between them. This is our extraction point. So Jose and Tiago will man a boat, ferry you and the kid 9 miles down the river to your chopper. Any questions?
How many hostiles on site?
Maybe 20. Okay, clock is ticking. Let's chop chop.
That's meeting with the mentor.
Yeah, totally agree. My note here was just the briefing. There's a moment in the briefing where they cut to G, the sniper with the glorious beard.
Yeah.
And that shot, I thought, oh, he's going to betray Tyler.
Yeah, me too.
There was just something about the look in his eye
Yes.
that I thought, there's a shapeshifter.
Totally agree.
Turns out I was wrong, but that just goes to show that this movie did a lot of things that defied my expectations just because of the number of action movie. I hate the word trope.
Yeah.
But that's what it is.
And again, a great performance moment that wasn't necessarily in the script.
All right, next segment is crossing the first threshold. The hero must pass a barrier to enter the special world. This crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure. I saw the crossing of the first threshold as Tyler sitting at the cafe in Dhaka, and he receives a phone call by an unknown person.
You see the laundry across the street?
Yep.
Walk to it.
And then a van shows up full of armed gunmen,
Now what?
Welcome to Dhaka.
and they pull him into the van. And the driver, he says, "Welcome to Dhaka," as he's having a hood put over his head and he's thrown into a van full of armed men. Like, now you're in it, buddy.
Yes, totally agree. The threshold is the door of that van.
Yeah, and the Threshold Guardians are the men in the van, the men holding Ovi Jr.
That brings us to the end of Act 1. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Act 2.
All right, as we side quest at home, Jeff and I would like to thank our demigod level patrons for their continued generous support of this show. Scott Sanford, John Peterson Jr., Jeffrey Scott, Both Boys React, Chris Bodeker, Joseph Wilbur, and our newest, Michelle Calderon. Thank you, all of you, so very much. And thank you, all patrons who have subscribed to this show.
You're making a big difference. We are taking some steps to expand and professionalize our operation, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later in the show. But you're making a big difference for us and helping us achieve our dreams.
Hey, Jeff,
Dan,
what have you been reading and watching?
I've been doing a Pixar marathon on Saturday nights with my kids, so I watched Toy Story 2, 3, and 4. And then last night we watched Onward. The Toy Story films are great. I watched Onward. I didn't like it so much. The ending was good. The characters were kind of shallow. And then I finished Bosch season 6. So good. And then I did some playing on Pillars of Eternity. So I got a lot of entertainment in. Oh, and I'm halfway through The Way of Kings. So I should be finished by the end of this year.
I'm proud of you. You, for a long time, your opportunities to watch movies have been limited. You seem to have been setting aside time.
Yes.
To not only watch movies, but to watch them with your kids, so you're getting that shared experience.
Yes.
When I watched Toy Story 3, I thought, okay, this is the perfect conclusion. We don't ever need another Toy Story movie. And then I heard about Toy Story 4, and I have not seen it. Is it a worthy addition to the series?
It's my least favorite of the films. They definitely cover territory they haven't covered before, so I think it's worth watching. It definitely adds something to the Toy Story canon, and it tackles themes that aren't tackled in the other films. It's worth watching.
Okay.
How about you, Dan? What have you been watching, reading, playing?
I am a disappointment to myself and to Bosch fans around the world because I have not yet watched Bosch season 6.
Daniel.
And I'm not sure why I'm delaying that. I love that show, and I don't understand why I'm refusing to watch season 6 because I was really excited about it. But I did watch some movies. One is a 2008 film from Thailand called Chocolate. This is a movie about an autistic girl who learns martial arts by watching movies and then uses her skills to collect debts owed by gangs to her terminally ill mother to help pay for medical bills.
What?
So the martial arts that this girl deploys is all in homage to people like Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, Tony Jaa, because those are the movies that she watched.
What?
And so you see their moves in her as she's collecting debts.
I will be
from
watching this
these
film.
gangs.
Holy crap, that sounds amazing.
It was really fun. I had a great time with it. I think that's my favorite martial arts film that I've seen since The Raid. The next movie I watched was from 2018 called The Man Who Killed Hitler and Then the Bigfoot.
I'm in.
Starring Sam Elliott as an aging man who's been carrying a government secret his entire life, and then he's asked to take on another one. And then the last movie I watched was just a couple of days ago, and it's interesting that you watched a Kubrick film as well. I watched his directorial debut from 1953 called Fear and Desire. It is a 61-minute movie about 4 soldiers trapped 6 miles behind enemy lines during a fictional war, and it seemed a little Twilight Zone-y to me based on the performances. They were a little melodramatic, and I feel like a lot of Twilight Zone episodes that I've seen, that era of acting had some melodrama to it. Probably because at that time, a lot of actors, they were theater actors first.
You're right. Acting styles evolve over time, and the earlier in film history, the worse the camera, the less equipment they had, the wider shots everything was in, and so they had to project and mug, and they didn't get used to. They were behind the technology sometimes, I think.
Not really the greatest movie, but if you are a fan of film history, it's worth watching. It's on, I can't remember if I watched it on Amazon Prime or on Netflix, but it's streaming on one of those services right now. Terrible title, though. Fear and Desire. It's like, audience, this is what the film is about.
Theme.
Awful title.
Theme and subtext is the name of my film.
Right. Okay. Shall we move on to Act 2 now?
Sounds good. Act 2 of Extraction begins with tests, allies, and enemies, or as Campbell calls it, the Road of Trials, which is probably the more appropriate title for this film.
Absolutely.
The hero is now in the special world. He makes allies, meets enemies, and has to pass a series of tests to prove his worthiness. The allies here are Tyler's team. Nick, his handler, G, a sniper, and the rest of his operatives. The enemies would be Bangladeshi drug lord Amir Asif and his underlings, Farad, the teenage gangster, the gray-haired colonel, and then eventually the entire Dhaka Metro Police Force, and eventually anyone under Asif's sway, which is mostly the entire city of Dhaka.
Seems like it.
Yeah. And then there's a key shapeshifter in the film, which is Seju, Ovi's father's lieutenant, the one tasked with bringing Ovi back. He begins as an enemy. He dupes Tyler and his team by hiring him to perform the extraction, then withholding payment as he tries to take possession of Ovi himself. In the beginning of the film, as you mentioned, we've seen Seju's situation. He's got a wife and a kid, and Ovi Sr. threatens to kill them both if Seju doesn't get Ovi back. So his hands are tied. He's not an evil man. He's trying to save his family too. And then by the end of the film, Seju becomes an ally, helping Tyler get Ovi across the bridge and out of Asif's reach.
Yeah, I thought Saju's motivations were much more noble at the beginning of the film.
Yeah, absolutely.
You feel for Saju.
His motivations are far more pure than Tyler's.
Tyler's looking for a paycheck.
Yeah. Okay, in the interest of not falling into the pit trap of plot listing, I'm going to focus on a few key tests. So please feel free to insert.
You missed a character.
Oh.
What do you think about Gaspar?
Oh, Gaspar's a shapeshifter. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
He's the opposite. He's the opposite of Saju. He starts as an ally and becomes an enemy.
Yes, totally agree. So, the first test is Tyler shows up at the apartment where Ovi's being held, and he's pretending to be there to get proof of life. And this first test, the kidnappers are mocking him and they're trying to dominate him. This guy, puts a cigarette in his face and blows his smoke, trying to be the one in charge. And Rake snatches the cigarette and then takes a drag. It's such a power move.
Right.
And then the guy puts the gun to his forehead and pulls the trigger, and Rake doesn't flinch. And afterwards, they're like, "Whoa, you're crazy." And he says, there was no magazine in it. But we also see that per Nick's previous statement about you're playing Russian roulette and waiting for a bullet to be in the chamber, we get the feeling maybe Rake didn't care if he bought it right then. Tyler and Ovi make it to the edge of town, and then the two of them set off through the woods toward the river where they're going to catch a boat. As Nick and crew are waiting for the payment, a mysterious assassin shows up.
There's someone else in those woods, about 100 meters out, and closing in on your position.
And kills Alpha Team on the boat, then G, the sniper.
G, you got eyes on the boat?
I'm looking at it right now. Our boys haven't come up yet. I'm moving in for a closer look.
Yeah, when G dies, that was the moment I was like, okay, so this isn't gonna go the way I thought it was gonna go.
So then the assassin starts hunting Rake and the boy, and the police boats are closing in on their escape vehicle. They don't get out. That's a failed test. And then the mysterious assassin, turns out to be Seiju. And he wants the boy and says he won't hurt him. And this is the moment where we realize he hired Tyler and intended not to pay him. It's the payoff of the setup where he said, there's a way I can make this work. So Tyler manages to get the boy away. In the most incredible chase sequence I think I've ever seen in a film.
Yes.
When I tell you to, you better run like hell or I'm gonna kill you both. You understand? Go!
This is an 11.5-minute chase through the streets of Dhaka and apartment buildings, and it's woven together in one continuous shot. Now, there are cut points, but it's a continuous experience that you see from the point of view of one single shot with no cuts for 11.5 minutes.
Yeah, it's an impressive feat of filmmaking and editing.
Yes.
To put all those pieces together. There are 36 segments ultimately.
Yes.
But the way they are edited, there are very few points where I saw an obvious place where, that was probably a cut, like where the camera will push in on a character's back to the point where the screen goes completely dark.
Yes.
But for the most part, I could not find most of those 36 different segments. It looks like it's one shot. It's incredible.
And the other thing is, the first time I watched it, I was just in the moment. I didn't stop to go, wow, this is one long shot. And then when I watched it again, I was like, holy cow, when was the last cut? And I had to keep backing up and backing up and backing up. So anyway, Tyler kills more than a dozen men and manages to get out of immediate danger. And that is what I see as the final pass test.
No, left. You just passed it.
Next segment is approach to the inmost cave. This is where the hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of his quest is hidden. This film is broken up pretty nicely, acts 1, 2, and 3, by establishing shots of the city.
Yeah.
After the chase and the truck that Tyler was driving has flipped over and exploded after he and Ovi Jr. dive out, there's an establishing shot of dusk falling over the city as Tyler and Ovi Jr. hide in a factory after business hours. One of the functions of the approach to the inmost cave is a moment of reflection, a quiet moment of preparation, and I think there's a little bit of both of that here while Tyler and Ovi Jr. are in this manager's office of the factory.
Yeah.
There's some first aid is applied. Ovi helps Tyler bandage one of his wounds. Nick calls Tyler.
Yeah.
Our new friend is Sergio Rav, ex-Special Forces. He works with the kid's father. We were played. Second transfer never came through. Mahjong got us to do the heavy lifting and he doesn't want to pay.
What about G?
The whole team is dead.
So this is a warning that the guy you're up against is serious business.
Yeah.
He's hardcore. And she suggests you need to leave the kid behind. The money never came through. It's time for you to just get out of this alive. This is the moment where Tyler begins to shift his perspective from mercenary looking for a payday to, and he's not entirely there yet, but he's beginning to shift from that to a man trying to protect a child. There's this discussion that's a really, really nice discussion between Ovi Jr. and Tyler where the kid says, I'm just a package to you, a thing. My father feels the same way about me.
Yeah.
And Tyler actually apologizes to the kid. He feels bad that he made the kid feel bad, and he apologizes and says, I didn't mean it that way, which shows a little crack in this hard shell of mercenary.
Yes.
There's also a moment for Saju here. He is in a hotel room of his own, and he's applying first aid to himself. He's got a broken nose. Oh, that scene where he sets the nose. And then he has an opportunity to call his family. He talks to his wife and his young son. And this moment at the end when he hangs up after that phone call and he's just overcome with emotion and he's kissing the phone.
Yeah.
And it's almost like he feels that could have been the last moment that he'll ever talk to his family.
Oh, yeah.
Because this job has gone so bad. Tyler and Ovi then get a call from Nick saying there's a helicopter waiting 4 kilometers away. Get there and we can get you out. So Tyler and Ovi leave the factory but are attacked by Farad and the Goonies from hell.
Yeah.
These children wielding machetes and AK-47s, and he just disarms them and kind of disables them, which shows a little more humanity. Tyler is not just a bloodthirsty killer. He has a code. So they hide in the sewer.
Yeah.
As Tyler says, the worst smelling sewer in the world. And he begs Nick to call Gaspar, even though Nick says that's not a good idea. And I saw that was the end of the approach to the inmost cave.
Absolutely. I just wanted to highlight one other thing. As you mentioned, there's a moment in this scene where Tyler says he's not going to leave the kid out on the street. And you're like, oh, is he becoming the savior here? And then he says to Nick, get my money. And I wasn't convinced in that moment that it was about the money anymore. I got the impression that he was just justifying things to Nick so that she would continue and not lose confidence in him. Also, during those moments, we see another flash of that person on the beach. And I think if I remember correctly, it becomes you see a little bit more of the person. It's not just feet, now it's legs, and you're getting the feeling that it's not that it's a small person, like it might be a child. And that highlights, is he suddenly having empathy? Could this start to be about resolving that thing inside him that's been torturing him since the top of the movie?
Right.
Also, I wanted to highlight that in this scene, I was obsessed by the giant watch he's wearing. I mean, Chris Hemsworth's wrists are probably the width of my bicep, and that watch still looks giant on him. Anyway, that brings us to the ordeal. Our hero faces the ultimate test. often risking death to overcome his worst fear and sometimes actually appearing to die. Gaspar arrives and takes them to his safe house. We get the feeling this isn't necessarily where he lives because he has a wife somewhere. Tyler takes the opportunity to take more OxyContin and whiskey, and he and Gaspar do a little old war buddy talk. They kind of remember old times, and you get the impression that they have a real bond. And then Gaspar goes off to, pay attention to his wife so she doesn't think something's up. And Tyler goes up to bring Ovi some food, and Ovi starts asking him about his life. This is where Tyler reveals that he had a wife and a son, and that the son died of lymphoma, and that when it got really bad, he left his wife and volunteered for another tour in Afghanistan because he couldn't bear to watch his son die. And he actually breaks into tears here. And we don't expect it from this tough guy. But Ovi has opened up a crack in that armor, and now we understand why he's suddenly so determined to get Ovi to safety. This has become a redemption possibility for him. He's got to save this kid to make up for his running out on his kid. And so, in a way, there's a death of his ego. This is his worst fear, is facing another failure. He starts to see Ovi as a surrogate for his son. So that's a moment of darkness. But to me, the real ordeal is when Gaspar comes back.
That kid is a walking corpse. Asif will never let him live. Think the disgrace. I mean, you get him home, and then what? His father's in prison. There's no way to protect him. You know what the best thing you could do? The best thing you could do, honestly, would be to go up there right now and just go put a bullet in his brain. Make it painless. Because the animals out there, they're not going to be as kind to him. They like to start with the ears. And then they cut off each finger at the joint.
Matt, you're drunk.
I'm talking about mercy, Tyler. You know how much he's worth?
Talking about a kid, Gaspar.
Okay, we're talking about a gangster's kid. With a price tag of $10 million on his head.
Right, you need to sober up, mate.
You're a mercenary, right, Tyler? Why don't you act a mercenary?
And it turns out he has made a deal with Asif, with whom he's had dealings before, and he says, you and me, we kill the kid, we split the $10 million bounty, and we get out of here safe. And there's a temptation, right? There's that temptation to be the mercenary again, to get the money and get off scot-free. And he confronts Gaspar and says, no, you're not doing this. And they have a fight, and Gaspar's winning. He's the more powerful hand-to-hand combatant. And then Ovi comes down the stairs with a pistol and caps Gaspar twice in the chest. And this is the turning point where now Ovi has become an active participant in his own rescue. And then he breaks down and leans into Tyler's shoulder. And now the father and son relationship is undeniable. And Tyler says,
I'll get you home, mate. I'll get you home.
To me, the face-off with Gaspar is his ordeal. He almost dies, and Ovi saves him.
The main function of the ordeal is a shift in the main character, a death of the character, either literally or symbolically, and they come out of the ordeal a different person.
Yeah.
So as you talked about the discussion between Ovi and Tyler, that cracking of his armor, the letting loose of his emotion and his honesty. So that's the death of the hard mercenary into like a relatable, emotional human being.
Yeah.
There's also a death of the character here when Gaspar is trying to convince Tyler to do this act that he's suggesting. He says, you saved my life once. Let me save yours now. And by refusing to take that deal, Tyler is ultimately signing his own death warrant. Because now the full force of Amir Asif's power is going to come after Tyler. So there's a foreshadowed death of the main character here.
Agreed.
And a third I saw is the death of innocence. When Ovi is forced to kill Gaspar, that's the death of his innocence.
Yeah. Gaspar plays he says such little screen time. He's mentioned at the beginning, and then he comes in for this 20-minute sequence and he's gone. And sometimes to me, that's a clue that character represents some part of our hero. And I think for Gaspar, he even says, you're a merc, right? You're a mercenary. Play the part of the mercenary. And when he dies, that's the death of Tyler's mercenary.
Exactly. There's one part of the ordeal. Tyler calls Saju and says, I've got the boy. I need your help. This is part of his shift from the mercenary looking for a paycheck to now I'm calling the guy who tried to kill me to take Ovi without having to pay me for rescuing Ovi. Now I'm calling him and I'm just going to give him the boy. I think that's the end of the ordeal. Moving on to the final segment of Act 2, Reward, or the ultimate boon. Having faced their worst fear, the hero seizes the object of their quest. During the ordeal at Gaspar's safe house, Tyler and Ovi have solidified a bond. Tyler also gains Saju as an ally. And when they meet the following morning to exchange Ovi, Saju shows respect to Tyler by explaining his motive for his actions.
He was gonna kill my family if I didn't get his son back.
I thought that was an expression of respect to a fellow warrior, saying these were not acts of malice. I was desperate. And by sharing that with Tyler, there's an exchange of humanity there.
Yeah. So this is the point in the show where Dan and I usually share a beverage, an adult beverage themed to the subject of the episode. But we've received some feedback from parents and teachers who want to use this podcast as a way to educate their teens about storytelling. And so we gave it some soul searching, and we've decided that we really want to make this podcast more accessible to that audience. So here's what we're going to do. We're still going to do the beverage break, but we are going to record it and release it on Patreon, but it's going to be free content. So any listener of the Hero's Journey podcast, you can go to patreon.com/Hero's Journey and listen to the beverage break segments free of charge. And then while you're there, if you see other content that inspires you, you can become a patron. But the beverage break will be free. All right, we're going to refresh our coffees and our waters, and we're going to move into Act 3. Act 3 begins with the road back. The hero is pursued by vengeful forces he disturbed when he seized the object of his quest. On the way to the bridge, Tyler, Seiju, and Ovi face the first blockade. They are trapped in a building, pinned down by cops. Tyler draws the bad guys away so Seiju can get past with Ovi. Seiju almost makes it through the bridge checkpoint, but one of the guards recognizes Ovi, and Seiju is forced to spring into action with the machine gun he's been concealing under his big scarf garment. So now he's blowing people away.
Scarf garment, is that what that's called?
I couldn't think of the name. It's not I don't know. So now the vengeful forces are all the cops, and everyone in the city is now an agent of Asif. So they are all shooting at him. Asif's helicopters descend and pin down Seiju and Ovi. And then the gray-haired colonel snipes Seju and then drives away the rescue helicopter. These are the vengeful forces, and now Tyler is out of allies. He is left to save Ovi entirely on his own.
Yeah, the bridge to the extraction point is literally a road back.
Yes, well done.
So that brings us to the resurrection, or the Master of Two Worlds, where the hero is purified by death in either a literal or a symbolic way, and returns to the land of the living a changed person. Tyler's task was to draw forces away from the bridge, but Saju calls him back to the bridge to assist him because he is overwhelmed, and then he gets killed. So, as you stated, Tyler has to get Ovi across the bridge by himself now. And he does so having taken a sniper bullet from the Colonel. And this is a callback to the very first scene, that flash forward that we saw at the beginning of the film.
Yes.
And as Tyler now lays dying, we see another flash, a memory of what we now know is his son. And for the first time, we see his son in full focus.
Yes.
Which is somewhat of a resurrection of Tyler's son. We're not seeing that blurry image anymore.
Yeah.
Ovi finds Tyler and begs him to get up, but Tyler seems to have had enough, and he's bleeding all over from multiple injuries. And the helicopter that was originally chased away by the Colonel's sniper fire has returned. The sniper has been eliminated by Nick, who has not only used a rocket-propelled grenade to eliminate the enemy helicopter that was harassing Saju, but she has now used a sniper rifle of her own to eliminate the Colonel. Unfortunately, too late, because the Colonel has now killed Saju and very gravely wounded Tyler.
Right.
But the way is now mostly clear, so Tyler urges Ovi to sprint across that bridge toward that helicopter as fast as he possibly can. And as he does, he gets to Nick, and he is now safe.
Yes.
Mission accomplished for Tyler. Despite all of his trials and all of the betrayals, Ovi is safe. And you mentioned earlier the scene where he has kind of clawed his way to the railing, and he has stood up, and he's leaning up against the railing, holding his neck. Oh, I forgot. Farad shows up at the very last second and shoots Tyler through the back of the neck.
Yes.
Just as Tyler thinks he has eliminated all of his opposition, because he is now stumbling back across the bridge to where Nick awaits. And you see this look of relief on Nick's face. It's almost like a we won moment. And then Farad shows up. As Tyler is clutching that neck wound and leaning up against the railing of the bridge, he looks over at Nick and Ovi, and as you said, he nods. It's this acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And then he falls over backward in a kind of a mirror image of his plunge off the cliff into the lake at the beginning of the film.
Mm-hmm.
He falls over backward into the Buraganga River, I believe it was called. I almost wanted to say that is a baptism, but not really, because he's not emerging a changed person from that. The plunge into the river is more not a return from the underworld, but more a return to maybe the symbolic womb of the earth.
I love the symbolism of what you just said, like a return to the womb. But I also think his sins are washed away because he's redeemed himself now.
A moment that I saw at the end that sort of touches upon resurrection is Farad goes to the railing and looks over the side, looking for Tyler's body, and there isn't one. And that sets up an ambiguous ending.
Yes.
Because I think in some movies, in some stories, that character that Farad fulfills in this segment would see the dead body floating in the river. Like there would be a shot of Tyler being carried by the current or something.
You're right. Asif even says earlier after the truck explosion, I want to see the bodies. And
Yes,
Farad
right.
would be the guy who stands over the dead body, and there is none. That's a great point.
That was what I saw as the end of the resurrection.
That brings us to Return with the Elixir, the freedom to live. The hero, having won some precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. 8 months later, Nick shows up at the restaurant where Asif is eating. She goes into the restroom, waits till he's at the urinal, and blows his brains out all over the wall. Turns around and walks out. And there's a really great detail. The shell of the bullet she fires is sort of rolling toward the camera as she walks past. It's a really cool shot.
I didn't catch that. I'll check it out again.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. There's the comeuppance of the villain. Ovi is at school, and he dives from a high platform into a swimming pool. When he gets into the water, he stays at the bottom for a while, which is an echo of Tyler's first submersion at the beginning of the film. This is a bit of a baptism for him. He's been through a lot, and he's done violence too. So he needs a rebirth. He needs a new start. And then when he surfaces, he looks to the right and sees a man standing there in jeans, a blonde guy, and he's just out of focus. And, we wonder, is it Tyler? Is it some kind of vision, or is he really seeing Tyler? And I was called back to the moment during the ordeal when Ovi shares a quote from a book.
You drown, not by falling into the river, but by staying submerged in it.
Who told you that?
I read it in a book in school.
We've seen Tyler and Ovi stay submerged and then come back up. We never see Tyler come back up when he falls backward into the river until we see that image of a man. And so that's another clue that Tyler's not dead.
Well, I don't know about that. It could be, he's out of focus just like Tyler's son was, so it could be that.
Right. It's certainly left ambiguous, but like you said, Farad not seeing the body is a nod toward Tyler not being dead. And I'm just saying that poem or that quote is another indication that Tyler might not be dead.
Yeah.
So Tyler has achieved freedom to live either in the peace of death and having reconciled with his abandonment of his wife and son, or he's literally still alive. And Ovi gets his freedom to live too. The gangster who was after him is dead, and now he can go back to his ordinary world of being the privileged son of a Mumbai drug lord.
So the sequel is going to be, Amir Asif is dead, but Farad was up and coming.
Right.
So he's going to take over Amir Asif's empire and come after Ovi because now...
Maybe.
Now he wants revenge.
Maybe.
They did leave it open for a second film if they wanted to make one.
They did, and it's under development now, so I think that's an indication that Tyler's not dead. Unless they're going to get Liam Hemsworth to be like the brother that we didn't know about who's going to come get revenge.
Well, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was a lot of fun.
I was so surprised and delighted by this movie and impressed by the technical aspects and the performances. I was resistant to having this be on the list, and I'm so glad that you kept it on.
Why were you resistant?
I hadn't seen Chris Hemsworth in a performance that I thought was deep, and it just looked like an action movie, white savior story, which it kind of is, but it was so well done on every level. I loved it.
Yeah, if this movie were Saju taking on the extraction mission, it would have been, probably just as good.
Yeah, totally.
Because I thought that actor, Randeep Hooda, I thought he did a great emotional... The scenes where he had to be emotional, like when he's speaking with his family, I thought he did a great job.
You're right. He was extraordinary.
Another comment that I saw some folks making is, why do American filmmakers always put a yellow tint on movies that take place in, the Middle East or Asia? Films like this. Why do they want the image to look dirtier? And that's a good point, but the feeling that I got by having that yellow tint is that I think yellow on an image evokes heat.
Yeah.
Like it is the beating down of the sun. It lends a sense of discomfort, just physical discomfort. Not only are you enduring these physical trials, but now it's probably really hot too, where they are.
The film where I found that most noticeable is in the Soderbergh film Traffic. And when you're in the U.S., everything is not even normal, but slightly blue tinted. And then when we're in Mexico, everything is yellow tinted. And that was, a visual way he separated the two worlds. And so I wonder if part of that choice is to visually indicate that we are in a foreign place, that this is a different world.
Yeah, could be. Well, Jeff.
Yeah.
Mission accomplished. The eggs are in the basket.
The sandwich is in the baggie.
The baby's in the buggy.
The balls are in the sack.
That's not, you made that up. That's not really a thing. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for Extraction. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have a different take on the film, feel free to leave a comment on this episode at heroesjourneypodcast.com. We would love to hear from you.
If you would like to support the Heroes Journey podcast, visit patreon.com/heroesjourney. And for just $3, less than your Instacart delivery fee, you can gain access to bonus audio episodes containing further discussion about the film or novel we just covered. And also, trivia and tidbits. Higher subscription tiers include video content and the ability to vote on the subject of future episodes.
The Hero's Journey is produced by Jeff Garvin and Dan Zarzana. We would like to thank Taylor Jordan of Dramatics.net for composing the Hero's Journey theme, and thank you to Dean Ethington for designing the Hero's Journey logo.
You may have noticed new episode artwork, starting with our episode about The Shining. That is the work of artist Jason Dorff. You can find more of his work at jasondorff.weebly.com. Also, I'm working on a redesign of our website, so please keep an eye out for that. When the new site is launched, I will announce it on social media. Follow Heroes Journey Podcast on Instagram and Heroes Podcast on Twitter for the best and latest information about this and future episodes.
Extraction is copyright 2020 Netflix US LLC.
Thanks again for listening, and until next time,
journey on.